I appreciate you coming on, man. I
dude.
shot you a text, or actually I called you like 2 hours ago. I said, man, I got an idea. Let's talk about live bait.
I'm always DTP, brother.
Down.
Always down to podcast.
I hear you,
and
man.
disturb the peace too.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah.
Spring fishing is in full force. Like, we got the Spanish mackerel here, the Atlantic bonita, the gray trout are going off just off the beach. Like, we're starting to see the glass minnows coming in, even hitting the inlet. The pilchards, they're on the way. The menhaden, if they're not already. Like, it's an exciting time, not to mention the mullet run.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
So, like, when I think of, like, live bait, I think of my biggest fish, to be honest. Like, some of my PBs, actually most of my PBs come from live bait. Like, what's your experience with live bait?
Easier. It's just easier. It's easier to fish with live bait for me because you don't have to do a whole bunch. You're not really tricking the fish. You know what I mean? With the artificial bait, you're trying to emulate a live bait the whole time. Like, match the hatch, you know what I mean? If you're catching live bait, you're matching the hatch if you're fishing in that area.
How do you catch? Well, let's start with a specific bait. Let's first start with mullet.
Mullet.
Okay,
all right,
that's
cool.
one that everyone uses. If they don't, they should. Like, where are you finding your live mullet?
Oh, it depends on what time of year. When the mullet runs here, they're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like right now they're way back up in the creeks. Same thing during the winter whenever I'm using those. I don't want to switch up baits, but I catch them the same way. Those tiger minnows, those are great for wintertime. They're about 3 inches long, and I find them way back up in the creeks at low tide. Another easy way to find mullet is low tide. Those mullet will get trapped in little tide pools and stuff. You can walk right up, throw your cast net on them, get you a bucket full of mullet. But right now I feel like they're kind of all back up in the creeks, before they really come in full effect.
One thing about the tiger minnows, I can't remember the scientific name, but it's stupid. It's like 75 characters long.
Is it?
Yeah, it's long.
We call them tiger minnows, okay?
And actually, you can catch those in like tidal pools at high tide if you like come off of these islands where the water will actually come up and start flushing into the sand.
Yeah.
They'll go all up in there.
Yeah, I've caught them like that before too.
Yeah, and they're great, like you said, for wintertime, just because it's going to be a fish that is abundant for the time of year, but at the same time, like, you're using that when you're not competing with a lot of other baits, such as like pilchards and menhaden and whatever it may be.
They live so good in the bucket. You can just throw them in a bucket. You don't need a bubbler or anything.
Yeah,
and they'll live.
What size hooks are you using for those? If I'm asking.
Small hooks, small like this right here, like a gorilla hook. Those small J hooks. I don't know if y'all can see that, but not that alt. Like a very thin wire.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
That's funny.
I love a small hook.
I love the gorillas too.
I do too.
They're like super thick, but at the same time, like, you don't have to worry about them breaking off.
Yeah. I love these. Before I started using Travis's product, the Jawbreaker jigs, I used these for sheepshead on a very small leader. But these things are so hardy, and I don't know. I love them. I get really good hook sets with them. I don't lose a lot of fish with them. But yeah, I use something like that in the wintertime. Small, very small.
Before, and I know I'm jumping all over the place, I use those for king rigs too, the gorillas.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Well, some of them king rigs have something similar on the front to that. It seems
for hooking the nose.
right.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So
mullet.
Yeah,
okay, mullet.
Yeah, we're jumping all over the place.
Yeah, mullet. Where do you normally find mullet this time of year, or coming into this time of year?
Like you said, you have a main creek off of the Intracoastal or coming out of the waterway. Usually they're back like a few bends around the corner, up in shallow water most of the time. It's usually sandy bottom. I don't see them so much in the like mud, but this time of year they're going to be big if you do find some. Like, I'm not seeing the little hatchlings yet. I'm seeing the 6-8 inchers.
Yeah, and I feel like you do have to go back up in there and catch them with a cast net.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a live well, 5-gallon bucket and a bubbler, you can't overpopulate that bucket because it'll kill them.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my experience.
What size net are you throwing?
I got a 8-footer, but this year I'm learning how to throw a 12 because I'm fishing the King tournament. So this year I'll know how to throw a 12. But I got an 8-footer. It's got holes all in it, but still works. They're expensive. I ain't trying to drive another $150.
You could take some monofilament and patch it up.
Yeah, I've done it. I've busted it up again. But yeah, I do need to patch it up.
Yeah. Well,
what size net you throw?
I used to throw a 12, and then I started moving down to an 8, and now I'm like, I'm trying to get super accurate with a 6.
I mean, it's easier to throw.
My shoulder don't shoulder like it used to.
Shoulder don't shoulder.
So man, I'm like, the 6, I could throw that thing for hours.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
Yeah, but and another thing with the larger net, you're gonna have a lot heavier net because you have to sink down faster because those fish can elude.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you find your mullet, and then how do you like to rig your mullet?
Mullet, I like them most of the time on a Carolina rig. Now, this is what I'm about to say is going to apply for all inshore live bait for me. Like, you got to think about your water column. If I'm going up to a dock at low tide and there's only a foot of water, you can throw a Carolina rig, that's fine. You could throw a popping cork with a 2 foot a leader with this hook right here I love. With that hook, or even this hook with a mullet, I hook them up through the bottom of the mouth, out through the nose, through the middle of the nose, like just behind the lip, so I don't kill them because I want them to stay alive. Or you can free line a mullet. Use a couple of little split weights. What are they called?
Split shot.
Split shots, like bass, like a bass. Just put one of those on there, like 6 inches, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches above your hook, and you can toss that little mullet up in there, and he'll swim around, kind of like he's injured because he's dragging that weight around. So I mean, there's 3 different ways to fish them, I feel like. And it just depends on the situation, the tide, the current, all that, what the water depth is.
When you're fishing these docks, how are you staging up on the dock?
I like to stage up on, I like fishing, God, it's hard to say because it's so dependent on the tide. Mm-hmm. If it's a low tide, I'm posting up on the outside of the dock. Like, say I'm fishing intercoastal waterway with live bait, I'm posting up on in the intercoastal waterway, like at the end of the dock, and I'm tossing my bait up current, and I'm letting the current do the work. And that's how I decide what size weight that I want to fish with, because I want the current to push it and move it so I cover more ground with it, because a flounder is going to eat that, a redfish is going to eat that, a trout is going to eat that if it's moving with the current, because that's what your live bait's doing. Your live bait ain't sitting still for the most part.
It's flushing with the
It's
with
moving
the water.
with the current, and these fish are staged up ready to ambush those baits. So I like to fish the lightest weight possible on everything to do with live bait.
Do you buy your Carolina rigs like pre-made?
No. I make them all. I like what you have here. This is a state of the art Eric Williams rig right here. This is genius, because the problem that I do have with those Carolina rigs, like you mentioned earlier, is my weight twisting around my braid at the swivel. Because check that out, guys. Yes, explain that, Eric.
So this is for big drum.
That's awesome.
But legally, I can't say that. So it's not for big drum. It's for bottom fishing.
Why? Why is that?
Well, because there's like rules, not necessarily in Wilmington, but say I were to go to the Pamlico Sound, this is illegal because it's too long. I can gut hook the fish because they can swallow 12 inches of leader here.
It's too long between the weight and
it's got to be 6 for the Lupton rig, and you got to be full circle without a barb, I believe. Don't quote me on that.
Wow.
I think that's the rule. But so this is 80-pound monofilament, and I leave myself tag in on both sides. This weight is actually crimped in the middle here, and call me crazy, but I like the sound that it makes.
Yeah, I do too.
It pops on the bottom, so like when you cast and it hits the bottom, your beads are smacking. Yeah, I know beads are designed to keep the weight from going over where it should be, but at the same time, it makes good noise. And then I just have swivels on both ends with a snell hook in trocar. This is number 7, I believe, trocar.
I like that.
But yeah, the reason I was asking is because you don't need 80-pound for inshore reds and flounder.
Right.
Like, what size are you using?
If I'm fishing structure, 30-pound fluoro. I like this cigar right here. This is, to me, it's the best deal. This inshore, you actually get 100 yards of fluoro, and this is 50-pound. And it's like $70, but you don't need 50-pound, I don't think, for inshore. I'm fishing 30 around structure. 20 would probably suffice if I had to go down to 20, which I do sometimes if I'm not getting a bite. 20 to 30 pound. 30 pound most of the time. That's like my go-to. But I like this because I get 100 yards instead of 25 yards.
I burn through 25 so fast.
It's so fast. But this right here is only 20, 30 more bucks, and you get 4 times the amount. So this cigar inshore, and I don't even think there's really a difference between it and that blue label. Blue label is the 25. I think it's 25 yards.
Yeah, that's the one that I normally use, but blue label, green, chartreuse label. It seems like there's 10 of them.
Yeah, this inshore stuff is really, it hadn't failed me.
Yeah.
And it's been awesome. And I feel like it's an investment to buy Fluoro. Because we're talking about the amount of money you spend on tackle and how you can save money using these rigs and like making your own rigs.
Yeah, this is just monofilament because I don't think the big drum care as much.
They don't.
They just see a mullet on the bottom area, they're going to smash it. But as far as like a inshore flounder, I do think that you need to be a little more stealthy because those big ones are smart.
What size Fluoro do you use inshore for flounder?
30.
30?
Yeah, typically 30. I feel like that's just a safe bet. You know, you can get away. Like say I'm trout fishing on some structure, I'm going to be using 15 to 20. Most of the time 15. But if I know that I'm trying to get up under docks and stuff, you really need to upsize and get that 20 to 30 range, in my opinion.
Well, it's true because it's been plenty of times I toss a mullet. I like to sit on the back side of the current of the dock. So say you guys can see me on this camera. Say the dock is right here and the current's moving this way. So the current's moving this way. The dock is right here. I like to pull my boat up right here and toss up in between the pilings and let the current kind of bring it back. That's just normally how I fish. And there's been plenty of times where 25-inch redfish has taken my bait and wrapped me around a piling. And when I have 30 on there, it gives me way more of a chance to be able to unwrap that thing. And it sounds crazy, but there's been plenty of times where I've been able to get that fish off of those pilings, like by pulling my boat up and pulling the fish at a different angle, just carefully. I know you've probably done it before too.
It's funny to think about the approach of a redfish. So I'm thinking about you'll toss your bait under and then you try to bounce it back to you. If a redfish is taking you around pilings, that means that fish hits it and darts left or right. Because that would be the only reason. I would assume that he would want to hit that current and get out of there.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do. But yeah, they swim up current to wrap me around a piling, which is crazy.
Yeah, I've never thought about it until you said that.
Yeah. They're they do whatever they want. Redfish does whatever they can do to get you to that structure. So yeah, that's live bait. I love live bait because I usually always catch fish. Not always with artificials, but
I think about the difference with a flounder and like when a flounder hits, it's a thump and he's sitting on the bottom. You know, he's not going to wrap you up for the most part, in my experience.
Do you wait before you set the hook with live bait?
No, man, I feel the thump. I'm thumping him.
Most of the time you get the hook set?
Yeah.
I usually wait like 10, 15 seconds. I mean, I say 10 or 15 seconds, but it's everything I can do to wait 5 seconds to set the hook, I'll be honest with you. They're like, hey, smoke a cigarette and then set your hook. I'm like, nah.
This is one of those questions where like you ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 answers.
Yeah.
Like the old, the BS where they're like, yeah, man, the flounder, he's going to scale that bait before he swallows it. That's what he's doing in there.
Flounder, he likes to fillet it up for you and then he'll swallow the bait after that, okay?
I don't believe none of that.
Nah, flounder don't scale the bait, dude. That's crazy.
All right, so trout, obviously you're not going to be throwing a bottom rig. What are you going to use around a dock for trout?
I've caught a bunch of trout on bottom rig, live mullet. I've caught them in Snow's Cut on a live mullet bottom rig. Probably caught 20 of them on Snow's Cut. I probably caught 8 of them in one day at Snow's Cut throwing a bottom rig. I've caught them on docks intercoastal waterway with a bottom rig. What else? I don't think I've really caught them on live bait any other way than a bottom rig because I'm usually throwing artificials for trout. Yeah. That's usually what I'm throwing. But yeah, that's honestly, dude, I've thrown a bottom rig and caught trout. That's weird, but
that's funny.
In heavy current. So it's like either I'll toss them off the back or I'll, same way I was telling you earlier, toss them up current, let them. But it's hard to get a hook set on a trout on a live bait. You lose a lot of fish. I feel like I lose a lot of, because if you don't have that rod in your hand ready to take the slack out of the line, you don't get the fish. Yeah. He'll take your mullet right off of there.
I've caught them on these same rigs that I just showed you, but it's been by accident. I'm after drum.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of same for me.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm going to fish a dock, I feel like the best way would be to do some type of slip rig or to use a popping cork and just let it free float. And you can pick your depth based on the area that you're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I like to do that in creeks. I like to put a mullet, and seeing how deep your water is in the creek's important because your fish most of the time are going to be closer to the bottom. If you're in 3 foot of water, I don't usually see them up on the top. But I like to maybe put a foot and a half of fluoro on a popping cork. I got a what's that stuff that I got Procure all over this thing. So I got
Oh.
it. That's what you smell in here, Eric. But this is a Cajun Thunder Popper, which I actually like, and I don't think they're very expensive. But I've had this one for like 3 years, and I've got like 2 more like it. But yeah, I like to tie fluoro onto that. Ugh, that's disgusting. I like to tie fluoro onto that, and this same hook right here, this little J hook, I really like for mullet. Mullet's important for me. I like the small hook is important for mullet. But yeah, tossing it up current, letting it float out. Just caught something like that the other day walking in a creek, which is really cool.
That is cool. So you'll set up and then you'll toss it up the current and you'll let it drift by you.
Yeah.
How far down are you letting it go before you reel it back and do it again?
I'll let it get to the boat most of the time, and I'll reel it up. I mean, if there's anything behind me I think could hold fish, I'll let it kind of float. But I normally probably jump those fish out when I pull the boat up if they're there. But yeah, it's simple.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I like about live bait. It's very simple. Anybody can do it. If you can catch bait, you can catch fish with bait.
What about other baits like pilchards or menhaden? Like, what's your take on those?
All right, let's talk about the names of these things because we all call them different stuff, right?
Yeah.
So pilchards, you're talking about a threadfin herring.
Threadfin herring, yeah.
Greenback. They
Yeah.
call them greenbacks. They call them
Greenies. I've heard
They
them
call
called
them
greenies.
greenies. They call them threadfin herring. They call them pilchards because a pilchard in Florida is totally different.
Well, it's in the pilchard family.
Okay, yeah, and it looks like it
Yeah.
is. So with those threadfin herrings or pilchards, catching those with a Sabiki rig, I just learned last year, which I think is super cool. And if you don't know what a Sabiki rig is, Google it. They're like $2. They're, what do you think? They're like 3 foot long.
Yeah, and you probably have what six different hooks on.
Tiny little hooks with
Yeah.
a little reflector on there, and you put a weight on one end and you drop this thing down. First of all, I want to mark these fish on my screen. I want to drop it down where I'm marking them, and then it's actually really fun.
It is fun.
It's really fun.
It'll get you jacked up before you even go.
Yeah, dude, it'll get you jacked up. And if you get 6 of them on there at once, it's like, oh, dude. Like, I've had nice sized bluefish hit the,
Yeah.
and anyway, Sabiki rig, I'm marking them on the screen. And that's really, those threadfin herring or those greenbacks, those are the first really good baits that show up to me. I mean, I know we'll have some menhaden, but those threadfin herring those are the ticket.
Yeah.
Those are the ticket. Those things are lively when you toss them in the water. If you can.
What are you targeting with that bait?
Flounder will eat them. If I see a cobia, I'm throwing that. 100%. If I have one of those, I'm gonna throw it. I mean, they're versatile. Tarpon eat them around here. I mean, when they show up, usually the tarpon show up right after. Now, I'm not a big tarpon fisherman, but I remember last year seeing tarpon roll right when these threadfin herrings start to show up. And I just had no clue how to catch the threadfin. I'd mark them on the screen. I didn't know how to catch them. And I talked to my buddy. He's like, hey, man, Sabiki. So it changed the game up for me because I had these big, hardy live baits in my live well. And I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
I'm sure redfish should eat them too.
Probably so.
I mean, it's the same thing as a menhaden pretty much.
Yeah, the difference with a red, I would probably cut it in half.
Cut it in half.
And then use it as fresh cut bait.
Absolutely.
If I were going to target fish that way.
It reminds me of a menhaden because it lives about the same. You know, like they might stay alive a little bit easier.
I think they do live easy, a little more effective.
But not as good as a mullet.
I agree.
And then the mullet, not as good as a mud minnow or a tiger minnow.
Yeah.
Like if I had to rank them from how well they live, it'd be number 1 mud minnow, number 2 tiger minnow, number 3 mullet, number 4 threadfin, number 5 menhaden.
Mm-hmm.
And menhaden they call them pogies.
Yeah.
What else do they call them? Pogies, menhaden.
Bunker.
Yeah. For the Yankees out there, like Elias V, bunker. But yeah, I mean, all these baits, you can't go wrong with a live bait. What do you think the most underestimated live bait is? I mean, not of what, even if of what we just named.
I mean, I'll cut a bluefish up and throw him out.
See, man, my boys swear by bluefish.
Yeah.
They're like redfish love cut bluefish.
Yeah.
They said
or if you catch one 6 to 8 inches, throw him on the hook and let him free swim.
Big kings.
Mm-hmm.
Big kings will eat that. I bet you cobias would eat it too.
Yeah, I've trolled different fish, bluefish, and had stuff hit it, but I have nothing to show for it yet. But I know that they do work just as effectively as the menhaden do. What about you?
Pinfish. Ever since I caught a cobia last year, my first cobia ever, I caught on a live pinfish, and what I was doing was standing in the marsh throwing the net early in the morning because I'm like, hey, we're going to go out and look for cobias because I saw a couple big ones yesterday, and we're going to really hone in on these things. And I'd always thrown pinfish back when they got. I just didn't want them to like mess my good baits up.
Yeah.
So I'd always throw them back. I got a 29-gallon live well now, and I caught a couple of pinfish, probably about like the size of a baseball, maybe about the size of this right here. And I was like, just throw them in the live well. We don't have a whole lot of mullet, and the ones we have aren't big. So I throw the couple pinfish in there, and I have cobia surrounding me, and I'm throwing everything I got at them. Like everything I have, I'm throwing at these cobia. And I throw a pinfish off the back on a Carolina rig, and I'm still tossing jigs because I'm surrounded by cobias. I put the jig back, grab the rod off the back, cobias ate the pinfish. And I land that fish, the first one ever. And I think in Florida, pinfish is one of their most used baits that they have in Florida. And how can we not learn from Floridians about fishing? Like, those people know how to fish.
Well, that's an abundant bait that is in every creek in the coastal area.
Probably from here to New York or something, It's like,
especially the time of year. Like, we're getting to the point where they're about to move inshore, if they're not already. I haven't done any inshore fishing lately, so that's why I say I'm not sure, but they will be abundant. And
they're aggravating, so why not use them as a piece of bait to get you something good?
Yeah.
Turn them into something not aggravating.
Do you chum with? So you catch a whole bucket full of menhaden and you've got some extra. Do you cut them up and chum with them?
If I have them, I definitely will. Mm-hmm. I definitely will. But you got to keep in mind, or I have to remember that when I start chumming, sharks are going to show up.
Yeah.
Which ain't necessarily a bad thing if you're cobia fishing, but if you're trying to catch other stuff, when you start dropping down cut bait and things of that nature, like especially if you're offshore, or not offshore, but near shore, if you're fishing with these baits, like I always try to fish with my live baits first, because all those trash fish don't necessarily come to a live bait when I drop it down. When I drop down a cut bait, those dogfish, I think they're called dogfish. They're like little sand sharks or whatever. They come in, and then you get all kinds of stuff coming in, black tips, which are still fun for people who, they're fun for me.
Yeah.
So, but it's hard to fish when you're surrounded by sharks.
Yeah. If when you catch a good fish, they're gonna take it.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, chumming, man, it's like sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It just depends on the situation. It has to be pretty slow for me to start chumming.
Yeah.
If I'm not catching anything, I'm gonna chum it up. What about you? You ever chum?
I've done it a little bit with extra mullet just to see if it gets anything up. But I also don't have the boat to get out to these areas where it would be effective. So I don't have the experience to support a good answer for that.
Yeah. I feel like it's a decision that once you make it, you can't undo it.
Yeah.
You got to either move spots, and then you lose your,
Well, I was talking to Tex at Texas Tackle last year, and he said that what some of those guys will do to catch the bonita is they'll buy the big blocks of glass minnows frozen, and they'll thaw them out, and they'll slowly throw a few out at a time and get the fish behind the boat, and then you can take your fly rod and fly fish for them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that would be a form of chumming, even though you wouldn't be technically cutting a bait up. You're still throwing food out for them and to try to corral them and get them fired up. I would love to try that. I've never done that.
That's interesting.
Because they're going to flow with the current, so all you have to do is set up current of whatever the structure is you're trying to get them on. And I don't know why it wouldn't work.
It should work.
Yeah.
And then catch them with a fly rod. That'd be sick.
That would be awesome.
That would be sick, dude.
Yeah.
When do you cut a bait? If you're fishing a spot, you got your good live baits. You got really good live baits. You're fishing a near shore spot, or say the jetty, something, or even a dock. You're fishing a dock, you're throwing your live baits, you get nothing. At what point do you start injuring that bait or cutting that bait up, trying to get some scent in the water?
You can approach this from two answers. I feel like the first answer is, most of the time, if I'm not catching reds, flounder, whatever I'm after, the pinfish are going to attack that. I'm just thinking of mullet because that's primarily what I use for docks. They're going to be attacking it, turning it into chum. They're eating the eyes out. Mm-hmm. They're getting scent in the water. Well, if most of the time I'm trying to hit these areas at tide changes, and if I've been in an area that I think should have fish and I'm not doing anything, that's when I would consider cutting it. And I'm still going to leave some live on some rigs and some cut on the others, because I'm a firm believer in you need to be trying multiple things at once, because every day is different on the water and the fish may be keyed in on something else. So that is not a very clear yes or no, but I try a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I didn't really expect you to give like a black and white answer, because there really isn't one. Like if you're like, oh, I'd do it after 10 minutes of, I mean,
yeah,
it just depends on the day and the situation and the spot and how the fish are acting. I agree 100%. Yeah, but I think there does come a time in the day sometimes where it's like, man, this is slow. Like it's time to cut one of these things up.
I was thinking that about the chum. I was like, if it's 12 o'clock and you ain't caught nothing, chum.
I mean, do
You've
something.
spent 5-6 hours out there and you ain't done nothing with live bait. Like if you've got bait, cut it, chunk it, see if you can pull something up. I mean, if you think about like, say there's 5 cobias on the bottom that you don't know about patrolling the structure, and you can pull them up and catch one, that's an epic day.
Cobias will eat the most trashiest looking live bait you have too. Like my boy says, I pick the worst. If a cobia comes up to the boat, I pick the worst live bait I got out and toss it out. You know what I love? I love to, this is great for a live bait podcast, and I probably shouldn't even say this, but it's common sense, right? So I love to get a metal jig out when I hit a spot and catch a small fish. And if it's one of the fish that don't have a limit that's legal you can keep, I love taking that fish like a tomtate and putting it, I don't know if there's a limit on those, but I like to put them right on a hook and either toss them off the back or drop them to the bottom, like a smaller of whatever, a pinfish, a tomtate, a ringtail. I've had huge barracudas come up and smash ringtails. I had big grouper this year just destroy a tomtate. And, like, there's just not much like tossing out a live bait off the side of the boat and it's flipping on the surface and a 50-pound barracuda just coming up and destroying it. Or dropping a tomtate down that's 6 inches long and you feel him on the end of your rod, and then the grouper just boop, just destroys it, dude. Like, that's one thing that I like to do. I don't like, if you don't have to throw the fish back and I don't have any live bait, I'm going to drop that fish back down on the hook. I'm going to hook him through his nostrils. Same thing with those threadfin herrings. That's how I hook those. I hook them right through the nostrils, and they seem to live a lot longer when I do that. How do you hook your live baits normally? You didn't tell me. I told you my mullets, but you got to tell me your secrets.
I would hook the nose, and for example, if I'm using a king rig, I'll run one to the back behind the back fin. But if I'm fishing mullet, like it depends on the situation. Like say I'm fishing the jetty, I'll hook a mullet through the nose. If I start getting stripped, then I'll hook them through the back. I never hook them through the tail because you'll drown them.
Through the back where?
The back, like right above the backbone, like right behind the fin. I'll come in right
behind his dorsal.
Well, yeah. So about midway.
Okay.
And I'll hook him, and I don't want to go through the spine because then he won't swim anymore, but just above the spine. And I've caught a lot of big reds doing that.
And you're hooking them with a hook similar to that right there?
Yeah, and I didn't mention it earlier, but I'm a big fan of circle hooks. Like, I get it, the kale hook has its place, but I like, if I'm fishing live bait, I don't want to worry about me missing the fish because that circle hook's going to catch the fish. If you're the guy that has to put a rod in his hand and hold it and wait, and you're excited and you're just jacked up and got the jitters because you can't wait to feel it, like, you should use a kale. But I want to leisurely fish. I want to throw my stuff out there and have confidence, and a circle hook's going to catch, in my opinion.
Do you hook your mullet the same way as you hook your menhaden?
No, I wouldn't go through the back with a menhaden because they're so delicate. Like you were saying, the nose is the best way for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I hook them up through the mouth, but I only go through the top.
Yeah.
They seem to live longer.
If you close their mouth, they can't pull in that water and get the oxygen through the water.
So maybe I should hook those through the nose, but I do. I hook them only through the top part of their mouth, and they seem to do okay. I mean, they don't last long.
Yeah.
What about threadfin?
Same. I treat them the same as the menhaden. Yeah.
I do those through the nose because I can't find anywhere else to hook those. There's really nowhere else on the threadfin to hook them that's like.
I mean, if you're casting that fish, I don't think it matters. Like if you see a cobia on the surface, I think you hook it however you want.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of the guys that do the offshore fishing will actually hook underneath the belly, and toss out and just let them free float.
Like how? What do you mean underneath the belly?
They'll come in under, where the anal gland is.
Yeah,
They'll
yeah.
come up under there and then toss them out and just let them free line for like the tunas and mahi offshore if they're in them. But that's the difference. The fish is not going to live as effectively, I don't feel like.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Do you ever cut any of those up, the menhaden?
It depends on where you're at. Like say you're fishing Pamlico Sound, like that's the best way to catch the big drum because you got to have scent in the water.
Yeah.
So, but if I'm fishing here, like I like a live bait because like we were saying earlier, you never know what you're going to catch. You could get a tarpon, you can get a cobia,
Anything.
you can get a drum, like it can be anything. Whereas if you're in the Pamlico Sound, you're going to get a redfish.
Do you ever injure them?
No. I mean, I'll fish one that is injured, but honestly, I like the livelier baits. If I'm going to fish those first.
Yeah, I like to injure those pin. I like to cut the couple of the fins off the pinfish just to slow it down a little bit because them things are crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want it to look wounded, so I do like to cut a little bit off those. I'll even cut his back tail off sometimes just so he can't, like he's flopping, but he can't do a whole lot to get away from a predator if a predator comes after him.
That makes sense because the fish they're going to hit something that looks injured. I mean,
Crabs are live bait.
Crabs, yeah.
I mean, little crabs.
Yeah, we I don't know if you guys have seen it, but we did a Sheepshead podcast a few weeks ago. That's one you should definitely look at. We talk a lot about crabs, but we don't really talk a whole lot about blue crabs in that video.
Are we talking about live bait tonight or just bait?
Just
bait fishing.
Well, a crab is alive.
It is alive. But I was thinking quartering blue crabs is a great bait.
It is, yeah. And here's the key with that. Like people don't talk about this, but if you can get fresh blue crabs, it's hard to beat it for a redfish.
Hard to beat.
And you freezing it and using it a couple weeks later is fine, but you're going to have a lot more success with a crab that you buy that's alive and you break him in half and fish with him.
I feel like once they die, it's a wrap.
Yeah.
Like it just does not work as well.
Well, they turn so fast.
They turn so fast and they stink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a blue crab, I would treat it the same way as bait fish. It's super effective.
I've had really good luck on docks with that, quartering out blue crabs.
Would you throw them on a Carolina rig underneath, or are you fishing jawbreaker style?
Nah, I use Carolina rig. You definitely could do jawbreaker style. If you were fishing vertically, I feel like you could definitely. But I like the fact that the current's kind of moving it around, and my weight's right here. I like to fish up current and toss it down current. So it's like I feel like the current's probably still moving my crab around a little bit on the bottom.
Yeah.
But the fish are going to smell it from down current and
For sure.
swim up and get it. But yeah, you're right, dude. Blue crab, quartered for redfish, there's not much.
Well, the cool thing to prepare the crab for using it, you're going to trim the legs off. You're going to toss them over. That's chum.
Chum,
And then you're going to break the back off. You got all the guts and everything. You're going to toss that half shell in the water. That's more chum. So like it does offer, you're hitting them from multiple angles there.
Yeah, that's a little more of expensive. What about shrimp? What about live shrimp?
I know where to catch some in the summer, but I don't really have live shrimp places. But I mean, if you take a live shrimp and go fish the Noose or up Sneed's Ferry area, that's how they get those big speckled trout, is live shrimp.
Yeah, I believe that. They have a lot of, I was talking to Roger, and he was saying that a lot of brown shrimp hang out in there this time of year. So those fish are keyed in on smaller brown shrimp. I've just never really been a big shrimp fisherman because, for one, I don't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
And I don't ever catch them in my net, barely ever. But if I do, I'll throw them in the bucket. I don't think here's for me, like my biggest piece of advice for anybody listening to this about fishing bait and live bait. Almost anything I catch in my net, I'm going to put it in the live well because I'm trying to match the hatch. And you really just don't ever know what your big fish is going to come on. My boy caught a 6-pound trout on a cut piece of lizardfish. My other boy caught a citation red drum on a cut piece of bluefish. And these are like trash fish that we don't even like these fish. Like my cobia last year came on a live pinfish. That's like my biggest piece of advice is like pay attention to what's going on around me and learn how to throw a cast net because that's where my live bait's going to come from, or Sabiki rig. But
yeah, fish what's available.
What if I didn't know anything about fishing and I said, hey, Eric, what do I do? How do I catch live bait and what should I use for live bait? What would be your biggest advice for me on live bait fishing? if I didn't know anything about fishing. I was listening to this podcast.
Go get a small net, maybe even a 4-footer from Walmart for $25 because you're going to tear it up. And then learn how to throw it in the grass, not where there's sticks because you're going to tear it up, but in a grassy area, and get to a point where you can effectively open that thing up. And then you're going to go to try to find sandy areas. If you're walking, you have a spot, you have a point that you can go fish. Try to find those bait fish staged up. And like you said, if you see the mullet, you're going to be catching mullet. But if you let that net get to the bottom, there's no telling what you'll bring in. You may bring in your menhaden, you may bring in pinfish. It's going to be a good mix there. You may even get some shrimp if it's a muddy area. So my takeaway is I like that you said fish what you have the option of fishing. Don't be picky per se because the fish eat everything. But at the same time, like, learn how to throw that net. That's going to be your best friend.
Yeah, and I think keeping those baits alive is very important too. Like if all you have is a 5-gallon bucket, you need to get an aerator.
Yeah, for sure.
Keep batteries.
Keep extra, and maybe buy 2 aerators because those things suck. Once they get wet, they're shot.
They make a suction cup bubbler, and it's about like this big, and it's like $6. And it suction cups to the bottom of your bucket, and it makes quadruple the amount of bubbles come out of the same aerator. Great investment to keep your bait alive, guys. I fished with a 5-gallon bucket for years. I just now got a live well. So, I mean, if you want to keep your bait alive, invest like a couple bucks in something like that. That's a game changer.
Yeah. And I'll end with this. We'll have a little wrap-up segment, but I go to Academy and buy the $30. It is a pump. It suctions to the bottom of your 5-gallon bucket, and then it has terminals, and you hook it directly to your battery. And
I've seen those.
It's literally a bilge pump designed to cycle water back in the 5-gallon bucket. And I mean, they're tough as nails. For $30, awesome. And it has a filter and everything. You just take the filter out and spray it out with a hose, and it's ready to roll.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's my best advice is maybe even avoid the bubbler and spend a little extra money and get that one that hooks directly to your terminals.
I've never tried it, but
yeah,
that's my best takeaway from this podcast right there.
Well, everybody, I haven't mentioned it yet, but Lex is now a captain. So
let's go.
He's going to be taking people fishing, booking charters. I'm going to link his website down below. I'm also going to link his YouTube. But y'all go give him a follow if you're not already following him, and take somebody fishing, man.
Yeah, come out and fish with me. Let's have some fun. Hunt Rigs Charter Code, baby. Lex Hunt. Follow me. Captain Lex Hunt on Instagram. You know I changed my name the moment I got that license.
All right, guys, and if I can help you with real estate, my information's down below. We appreciate y'all. Thanks for coming on,
Eric.
Lex. We'll do it again.
Thanks, Eric.